All right, let's dive into this statement by Rachel Reeves. So Rachel Reeves, Labour's Chancellor, recently made some bold comments on the economy, tax policy, and spending. This is pretty crucial since it's coming on the heels of Labour's biggest tax package in decades. Basically, she's laying down the law on Labour's fiscal policies and future spending plans. Okay, let's break it down a bit. Reeves was firm on one main thing: no more tax hikes. She's saying that, despite the big tax increase that just happened, Labour isn't planning to go back for more. Yeah, she seems pretty set on that. Reeves is talking about living within our means with the current spending envelope. That's basically her way of saying, we've set these budget boundaries, and we're sticking to them. Now, you might be wondering, why so rigid? Well, there's context here. Last week's budget increased taxes by a massive PS40 billion, a figure we haven't seen in the past 3 decades. That's already a big bite, right? I mean, tax rises are never popular, but Reeves is framing it as a necessary, one-time adjustment. From what I see, her message to the public is that this reset is essential to steady the public finances and avoid more extreme cuts or taxes in the future. Yeah, okay, but here's where it gets more interesting. The government is also facing a bit of pushback on this strategy, particularly from the Treasury Select Committee in Parliament. The members there are pressing her on whether Labour's plans really mean enough cash will be available for unprotected departments like local councils, courts and prisons, and Reeves is standing her ground, insisting that the current budget will hold up for the next 5 years. Right now, she's not budging on adding more funds or increasing borrowing. For her, it's clear we're not going to come back with more tax hikes or more borrowing, she told the committee. Let's talk a little about this term unprotected departments Reeves mentioned. So, the protected ones are things like health and education areas that usually get priority when budgets are tight. But unprotected ones, they're often more vulnerable to cuts since they don't have the same priority. Reeves is being pressed on how these areas will manage if extra pressure hits, but her answer is kind of blunt. She's implying that they'll have to make do within what's been allocated. Now, this is all part of a big shift for Labour. Traditionally, Labour's been seen as a party that's willing to increase spending on social services, even if it means higher taxes or borrowing. But Reeves? She's presenting Labour as a lot more financially conservative here, saying Labour's not about unchecked spending anymore. Right, she even admitted over the weekend that she got it wrong earlier on, saying there wouldn't be big tax hikes pre-election. This is a bit of a shift in tone. What's really standing out to me is that Reeves described this budget as a reset, a chance for Labour to break from the past and solidify the public finances. She used the phrase draw a line in the sand, which, is a pretty dramatic way to say this budget marks a turning point. This isn't just business as usual, it's a whole new approach. Reeves is positioning this as a once-in-a-parliament move, a bold step to get public finances on a firm foundation, and she's saying it's meant to reassure everyone, families, businesses, markets. Labour is serious about being economically responsible and consistent. However, there's another layer here, right? The Institute for Fiscal Studies, IFS, has a slightly different take. Last week, the IFS suggested that if Labour doesn't want to return to austerity, those deep spending cuts we saw about a decade ago, an extra PS9 billion in taxes, could still be necessary. They're warning about tight budgets for certain departments, which is essentially a way of saying that some parts of government could feel squeezed without that extra funding. So, in a way, the IFS is kind of throwing up a caution sign, saying, hey, this tight spending plan might not be as smooth as it seems. Yeah, Reeves has some other challenges too. The financial markets are also a bit jittery, especially as government borrowing costs are on the rise. Some investors, particularly in the city, are worried about the government's debt levels. And as the Bank of England isn't expected to cut interest rates as quickly as some had hoped, those higher borrowing costs put even more pressure on government finances. This is probably why Reeves is so keen to reassure everyone that Labour has a handle on the budget. Oh, and let's not skip over her defence of Labour's spending growth plans. So she mentioned that there's an average annual increase of about 2% in real terms for day-to-day spending between 2023 to 2024 and 2029 to 2030. She's framing this as a significant boost, especially in the context of inflation and the rising costs of public services. It's a modest growth figure, but one she seems confident will help meet basic needs without extra taxes. The big takeaway here is that Labour's trying to thread a needle balancing the need for fiscal responsibility with the desire to avoid deep cuts to public services. Labour's positioning itself as the party of fiscal restraint, but also of honesty in budget forecast. Reeves even mentioned that this approach is meant to put the finances on a more honest trajectory. By honest, I think she means there's no more pretending that money can be spent endlessly. It's like she's saying, this is the real budget picture, these are the boundaries we'll stick to. In essence, Reeves is setting a tone for Labour's approach to the economy, one that's a bit more restrained and perhaps more appealing to voters who want fiscal responsibility. It's clear she's serious about avoiding the perception of Labour as a party that will always opt for spending hikes and borrowing. This budget is, in her words, setting the stage for a firm footing. So to sum up, Reeves is saying no more tax hikes, no more borrowing, and no more budget resets like this one. She's positioning Labour as the party that will be steady and disciplined with public finances. While the pressure might rise in the future, especially on departments that aren't ring-fenced, Reeves is sticking to her guns, promising that the budget, as set, will hold.